After a Navy SEAL strangles a female trainee, the captain orders the basin to silence. I have a habit I'm not proud of. When I don't know what to do with something, I write it down. Not in reports. Reports are for the version of events that has already been decided. I mean in the small brown moleskine I kept in the breast pocket of my utilities, the one I refilled twice a year and dated with a felt tip pen on the inside cover. My therapist calls it displacement journaling. I call it the only way I got through 14 years of service without losing my entire mind. I wrote this entry on the night of October 14th, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the exchange because I couldn't go back to my quarters and I couldn't go anywhere that had people in it. She said I'm fine before anyone asked. That was it. That was the whole entry. 3 hours in a cold car and that's what I had to show for it. It started at 0840 on a Tuesday, the way most catastrophic things start, as something routine. Combatives training. Bud/S adjacent pipeline, which meant the trainees were there to be broken and rebuilt, and everyone on that base understood that breakage was the point. Dara Osei was the only woman in her cohort, a distinction she had stopped acknowledging because acknowledging it gave people permission to make it the main thing about her. She'd told me that once, over bad coffee in the adjutant's office. The minute I let it be a story, it becomes someone else's story. She had a way of saying true things like they cost her nothing. The drill was a ground control exercise. Standard. Senior instructor demonstrates, trainees rotate through with a partner, instructor observes and corrects. Nothing that hadn't been run 100 times. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Gray was not supposed to be the one running the demonstration. The duty log shows instructor second class Delaney on the schedule. What happened between the schedule and the mat, I never fully reconstructed. There are at least 3 versions of that story and none of them are satisfying. What I know, Gray took the demo. Osei was the closest trainee. Gray selected her. What I know, the hold lasted 47 seconds after she tapped out. 47 seconds. I have sat with that number so many times that it has become almost abstract, the way a word stops meaning anything if you repeat it long enough. 47. 47. But, then, I remember that 47 seconds is longer than it takes to sing one verse of a song. Longer than it takes to boil water for tea on a good burner. Longer than almost anything that happens in a combatives demonstration. She tapped. He held. She tapped again. He held. The room had 12 trainees and 2 other instructors and not one of them moved. I've spent a long time trying to understand that. Trying not to be disgusted by it while still understanding it. These were people trained to act under pressure, trained to breach rooms and clear threats and carry their teammates out of situations that would reduce most people to rubble. And they stood there. Watching. The reason, when I finally pried it out of a few of them later in private, was not cowardice. Not exactly. It was something more complicated and more human. They were waiting for someone with more authority to move first. Everyone was waiting for the person above them to make the call. And that is the specific shape that institutional silence takes. It's not one person deciding not to act. It's 10 people each assuming someone else will. She went down on her own. Not unconscious, close. Her legs just stopped working in the functional sense, that specific dissolution that happens when the body decides it has more important problems than standing upright. She sat on the mat with her hands in her lap and her eyes open, and the first thing she said, before the medic got there, before anyone said anything to her at all, was, "I'm fine." Preemptive. Automatic. The armor going up before the blow even lands. The medic cleared her for no serious injury, technically accurate. No fractures. Bruising to the anterior neck, some soft tissue inflammation, elevated heart rate that came down. She was observed for 2 hours and released. She went back to her bunk. She went back to her bunk. I want you to feel the full weight of that. She went back to her bunk, in the same building, on the same base, 800 feet from the mat where it happened, because there was nowhere else to go. Because the system that was supposed to protect her was the same system trying to figure out whether what happened was a thing that required protecting from. I didn't hear about it until 1500, third hand, through my yeoman, who heard it from a corpsman, who heard it from one of the trainees who'd been in the room. The military information chain runs fastest when it's horizontal, between people who aren't supposed to be talking. By the time a thing gets reported upward, it has already been everywhere else. Captain Horace Delacroix called me into his office at 17:30. I should describe Delacroix because he matters to this story in a way that defies easy moral categorization, and I'm tired of stories that give you easy moral categories. He was not a villain. He was not a hero. He was a man who had spent 31 years becoming the kind of officer who could run a base like this one, and, in doing so, had learned, genuinely internalized, that certain kinds of events were solvable problems if you managed them early enough. He believed in the institution. Not blindly. Painfully. The way you believe in something you've given your whole life to and cannot afford to be wrong. He stood at his window when I came in, which is a thing people do when they want the conversation to feel like something other than what it is. "Marsh," he said. "You know what happened today?" "Yes, sir." "There will be an investigation. Internal. I want everything contained until that investigation is complete. No statements, no informal conversations with Jag, no." He paused, and the pause was doing a lot of work. "External communications. Clear? Contained." That was the word he used. The same word you use for a fire. For a chemical spill. For something that will spread if you don't put walls around it. I said, "Yes, sir," because I was, and this is the part one have to own, not yet ready to be the person who said no. I had not yet figured out which kind of soldier I was going to be. I stood in that office and I looked at this man I had served under for 4 years, and I decided that yes, sir was a temporary answer. That I would figure out the real answer later. In a minute. Tomorrow. Soon. I drove to the exchange. I sat in my car. I wrote 3 words in my Moleskine. Outside, the base was going quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. The lights were all on. People were moving through normal routines. But something had changed in the texture of it, the way a room changes when everyone in it knows something and is performing not knowing it. The way silence can be louder than noise if it has a shape. The shape of this silence was Dara Ose, 22 years old, sitting on a bunk 800 feet away, in a building full of people who were waiting for someone above them to move first. I sat in my car for 3 hours. I did not move first. Log entry, October 14, 2019. Time, 22:47. She said I'm fine before anyone asked. I wonder if she believes it. I wonder if she needs to. Silence has a metabolism. It eats. It grows. It circulates through a body, or a base, in ways that are almost biological, and, by the 3rd day after October 14, I could feel it in the physical structure of the place. In the way people looked slightly past each other during morning formation. In the way the mess hall had rearranged itself into small, insular clusters that dissolved the moment a senior officer walked in. In the way Instructor Delaney, the man who was supposed to be running the drill, had developed a sudden and convenient cold that kept him confined to quarters and unreachable by anyone asking informal questions. I kept writing in the log. It had become compulsive. Day 2. Gray still on base. Reassigned to administrative duties pending investigation. He ate breakfast in the main hall this morning. Scrambled eggs. He ate with appetite. I cannot stop thinking about that. Dara was still training. This is the thing that gutted me, that I didn't know how to file anywhere in my understanding of human resilience or human damage or the specific cocktail of both that military training brews. She was still running the O course at 0530, still in the water at 0700, still completing every evolution with the kind of mechanical efficiency that looked, from the outside, to someone not paying attention, like fine. Like functioning. I watched her from the admin building window one morning. She cleared the rope obstacle 3 times in a row, which you weren't required to do, which nobody asked her to do. 3 times. The 4th time she got to the top and just held there. Breathing. Looked out at something I couldn't see from where I was standing. I wrote, she's not training. She's proving something. To someone. Probably herself. Then, I wrote, who taught her that's the same thing? I had requested to speak with her on day 2, through proper channels, framing it as a routine adjutant check-in. The request came back denied. Not from her, she hadn't been asked. From Delacroix's office. Not the right time. Which meant, not before the internal investigation had decided what happened, because what she said to me informally, in my office, over bad coffee might become a thing that couldn't be managed. I want to be careful here. I want to resist the pull toward making Delacroix a monster, because what he was doing had a logic to it, and the logic wasn't purely self-serving. I believe he genuinely believed that a quiet investigation was better for Dara than a public one. That attention would damage her. That if this became a story, it would become everyone else's story. He was using her own words, her own armor, as the justification for stripping her of any choice in the matter. That's the specific shape that institutional protection takes. It sounds exactly like care. It functions exactly like a cage. On day 4, a trainee named Kowalski, 20 years old, from some flat place in Nebraska that he described as the kind of town that makes you good at leaving, knocked on my office door at 2100. He stood in the doorway for a moment in that particular posture of someone who has rehearsed something and is now reconsidering. I recognized it because I'd worn it outside Delacroix's office. "Lieutenant Commander," he said. I was there. "I know," I said. "Sit down." He sat. He put his hands on his knees and looked at them. He had a habit, I noticed it then, and again later, of pressing his thumbnail hard into the pad of his index finger when he was thinking. A small physical anchor. Something real while everything else was uncertain. "I've been trying to figure out," he said, "what the right thing is." Because I was told, not directly, but it was made clear that the investigation is ongoing and that nobody should. I know what you were told. He looked up. Something complicated moved through his face. "She tapped out," he said. She tapped out and he stopped. Pressed the thumbnail in. I can't stop seeing it. I can't stop knowing that he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I should have told him what to do next. I should have handed him a form, a name, a process. I had the resources. I knew the formal complaint mechanisms, knew the JAG contacts, knew exactly what the pathway was for a witness statement in a case like this. I should have said, "Here is the right thing, and here is how to do it, and I will back you up." I said, "Give me a couple days." Couple days. I said couple days to a 20-year-old who had walked into my office at 2100 to do the brave thing, and I sent him home with couple days. He looked at me for a moment, and I watched him understand something about how institutions work that nobody should have to learn at 20. Then, he nodded, stood up, and left. I wrote in the log, "I am becoming the silence." The break happened on day 6, and it didn't come from me. There is a particular petty officer, I'll call her Rodriguez, which is not her name, who had been Dara's bunkmate since week 2 of training. Rodriguez was not the kind of person who thought of herself as brave. She thought of herself as practical, which is a useful thing to be and, usually a safe one. She sorted her gear by frequency of use. She kept a running tally of her caloric intake on a small whiteboard above her bunk. She had no patience for what she called dramatic people, which was anyone who performed their emotions outward in ways she found inefficient. She was also, as I discovered, someone who had a direct line to a reporter embedded with a civilian oversight body that monitored training programs at bases along the eastern seaboard. She hadn't used it yet. She'd been sitting on it for 6 days, which for Rodriguez represented an almost geological patience. What broke it was not ideology. It was not politics. It was not even outrage, though outrage was there. What broke it was this: on the morning of day 6, she woke at 0430 for the head call and found Dara sitting on the floor between their bunks, back against the wall, knees drawn up, staring at the door. She'd been sitting there, apparently, for a while. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't. Rodriguez told me this later, matter-of-factly, with the careful precision of someone translating a feeling into a format they can manage. She wasn't in them. Rodriguez sat down on the floor next to her. She didn't say anything. Dara didn't say anything. They just sat there in the dark with the sound of the bass outside, and, at some point, Rodriguez put her hand, not around Dara, not in a demonstrative way, just on the floor next to Dara's hand. Close enough to feel. Dara looked at it. Then, she looked at Rodriguez. Rodriguez said, "I'm going to make a call today." Dara didn't say anything. Rodriguez said, "I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what's going to happen." Silence. Then, from Dara, so quietly it barely registered, "They'll say I'm a problem." "Yeah," Rodriguez said. Another silence. "Will you still make the call?" "Already said I would." I don't know how long they sat there after that. Rodriguez couldn't tell me. She said it felt like a long time and, also like nothing at all, which is the most honest description of a certain kind of human moment I've ever heard. Log entry, October 20th. Day 6. Rodriguez made the call at 0900. By 1400, I had 3 emails from external parties I was not supposed to be corresponding with. By 1600, Delacroix called me into his office again. He stood at the window again. Same window. Same posture. "This is going to get loud," he said. I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "There are going to be consequences." He meant for him. He knew that. I think he also meant for me. Maybe for Dara. Maybe just for the silence that its particular life was ending, and whatever came next would be louder and messier and harder to manage and possibly more honest. "Yes, sir," I said again. He was quiet for a long time. "I made the wrong call," he said. He said it to the window. Not to me. Maybe not to anyone. The kind of thing you say when you're testing whether it's true. I didn't answer him. I had already learned the cost of silence. I wasn't going to offer it as comfort. Here is what a reckoning looks like from the inside. It doesn't look like justice. It doesn't look like the movies, no gavel, no moment where the wrongdoer is led away in handcuffs while everyone who mattered stands in a clean line watching. It looks like paperwork. It looks like a lot of people using the word unfortunate in ways that mean entirely different things. It looks like the bass going from a managed silence to a loud, fractured, public noise, and that noise also being its own kind of damage, just a different kind. Rodriguez's call triggered a review. The review triggered a formal complaint. The formal complaint triggered a separate chain of oversight that Delacroix's internal investigation had, intentionally or not, been designed to precede and preempt. Lawyers materialized. The word systemic appeared in documents. Gray was suspended, not discharged, suspended pending a process that would take 11 months and result in something I'm not going to call justice because Dara herself told me that word didn't fit, and it's her word to give or withhold. I gave my own statement. 3 hours with investigators who asked questions I answered as completely as I could and some questions I answered as completely as I was willing to, which is a different thing. I told them about the log. They asked for it. I gave them a copy and kept the original, which I'm aware is a small act of preservation for something I'm not sure preserves anything useful. Kowalski gave a witness statement. So did 4 other trainees who had been in that room. They came forward in a cluster, not because one of them was brave enough to go first, but because someone, I don't know who, had sent an anonymous group message that said simply, "We all go at once or none of us go." Which is the specific shape that collective action takes when it starts from fear rather than courage and arrives at courage anyway. I want to tell you about Dara during those 11 months, because the investigation is not actually the story. The investigation is the scaffolding. What happened inside the scaffolding, that's the part I'm still trying to understand. She did not complete the pipeline. She was given a medical leave classification that she accepted under protest, in writing, which I thought was one of the most precise acts of resistance I had ever witnessed. She didn't fight the leave. She took it. But she put her objection on record, 2 paragraphs in clean, formal language, that stated clearly she was physically fit to continue, that the withdrawal was not her preference, that the decision was being made about her body and her service without her being the one to make it. 2 paragraphs. She put them in a drawer and, then, she went home to Atlanta for 3 months. I know what the next year looked like in outline. I know she went to therapy not because the military recommended it but because her mother, a woman with the bearing of someone who has been quietly holding things together for a long time, drove 4 hours to pick her up and made the appointment herself. I know she had nights that were bad in ways she doesn't talk about in detail. I know she had a period where she wasn't sleeping and a period where she was sleeping too much and that the difference between those two, to the people watching her, was barely visible but, to her felt like standing on different planets. I know she got a dog at month 7. Named him Corporal. She sent me a photo. I had given her my personal email, which was another thing I wasn't supposed to do and did anyway, of this enormous brown mess of a dog taking up 3/4 of her couch, and the caption said, "He doesn't know what's appropriate," which is extremely relatable. That was the first thing she'd sent me with any lightness in it. I read it 4 times. There is a conversation I have to tell you about that happened on the base, 3 months into the investigation, between me and Delacroix, and I've been putting it off because I'm still not sure what it means. He called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. He did not stand at the window this time. He was sitting at his desk, reading glasses on, a folder open in front of him that he closed when I came in. He looked, and I have thought about this word a long time before choosing it, smaller. Not in humiliation. In the way a person shrinks when they have been carrying something for a long time and, finally, put it down, and the putting down reveals how much of their size was the burden. I've submitted my retirement papers, he said. I didn't say anything. I want to say something to you. Off the record. He paused. Though I suppose at this point the concept of off the record is, he almost smiled. Didn't. I failed her. I told myself I was protecting the institution because the institution protects people, and, somewhere in that sentence the logic inverted and I didn't notice until it was too late. I want you to know that I know that. I looked at this man who had 31 years of service and a Distinguished Service Medal and a failure that would follow him into retirement, and I felt I have to be honest about this, because the log demands honesty. I felt something that was not forgiveness and not contempt but some third thing that I don't have a clean word for. The part of me that had sat in my car for 3 hours and said yes, sir, and given Kowalski couple days recognized something in him. The version of myself I didn't want to be. I said, "Have you told her that?" He looked at me. "What you just told me," I said. "Have you said it to her?" A long silence. "No. That seems like the wrong order," I said. I don't know if he ever did. I didn't follow up. Some threads you pull on and some threads you leave because pulling them would unravel something you're not sure you want to see. The review concluded. The findings were, as these things go, mixed, a word that means something happened and something will change and the change will be insufficient and we are calling that a resolution. Gray was separated from service. New protocols were announced for combatives instruction. Dara received a formal written apology from the branch, 2 paragraphs, official letterhead, signed by someone 3 tiers above Delacroix. She framed it. Not because it meant what it should have meant. Because it was documented proof that the thing happened, that the machine had been forced to acknowledge it, that the silence had ended and left a record. She hung it in the hallway of her apartment in Atlanta, next to a photo of her at BUD/S, standing in wet sand, soaking and grinning like a person who has found something she loves even in the middle of it trying to grind her down. She told me this in an email. She also told me she'd started working as a physical therapist. That she liked it. That there was something satisfying, she said, about helping people reclaim their bodies, and she said it plainly, not with the weight of metaphor, but I felt the weight anyway. I left the Navy 14 months after October 14th. I tell people it was planned, and it was, sort of. The timing was not unrelated to what happened, to who I had been in those first 6 days, to the particular flavor of my yes, sir, and my couple days and the 3 hours in the parking lot. I had looked at myself honestly and found a person who wanted to be better than she'd been and wasn't sure the institution left room for that. I still have the Moleskine. The original, not the copy I gave the investigators. The last entry is dated November 8, 3 weeks after the review concluded. One line. I've gone back and read it many times. I don't entirely understand it, which is probably why I keep going back. The wall was warm. She tapped out. We held. We is not an accusation. It is an accounting. Every person in that room, every person who moved through 6 days of silence without breaking it, everyone who waited for someone above them to go first. I held. That's the thing that doesn't heal clean, not for me. Dara is in Atlanta with her enormous dog and her 2 framed paragraphs and her laugh that comes from somewhere real. She did the work. She went through the fire the institution made for her and came out the other side with all her weight. I'm still standing outside a door somewhere, rehearsing. The last thing she ever sent me Christmas, 2 years out, was a photo of Corporal wearing a small Santa hat he had clearly already destroyed, one ear inside out, cotton fluff on his muzzle. No message. Just the photo. I have it still. I look at it when I need to remember what surviving looks like from the outside, absurd, imperfect, and somehow still warm.